Hoop Heads podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
I've always really been into, skill development and trying to help guys get better. When you see a guy that's, never made a three-point shot, make a three-point shot in a game, or, a guy that improves his free throw percentage, or a guy learns how to split a double team, or, just grows and becomes a better player. That's something that I think, just as a coach, for me anyway, is really exciting to know that, you help a young player get better and grow, and hopefully they'll continue to pass those things along as well.
Mark Price was a four-time NBA All-Star point guard with the Cleveland Cavaliers. He was named first-team All-NBA following the 1992-93 season. Mark is second all-time in free throw percentage in the NBA, and he won 2 All-Star Game three-point shootouts. Mark started as a high school player growing up in Enid, Oklahoma, and was twice named to the AP All-America team during his collegiate career at Georgia Tech under Coach Bobby Cremins. Since his retirement as a player, Mark has coached in high school, college, and the NBA. He's currently an assistant coach with the Denver Nuggets. It was an honor to be able to talk basketball with Mark. We hope you enjoy listening to this episode of the Hoop Heads podcast as much as we enjoyed recording it. While you're here, head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and review. The more ratings we receive, the easier it is for other listeners to find us, so we can continue to help grow the game with the Hoop Heads Pod. Hello and welcome to the Hoop Heads Podcast. It's Mike Linsing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel, and tonight we are pleased to be joined by former Cleveland Cavaliers All-Star point guard and current assistant coach for the NBA's Denver Nuggets, Mark Price. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Mike and Jason, it's good to be with you.
Well, we are very, very appreciative, as we said, to have you on the podcast with us. We're excited to get a chance to talk to you and learn a little bit more about your background as a young basketball player, and then talk to you about what you're doing now in terms of all the coaching things that you've had going on. So let's jump back to when you were a kid and talk about your earliest memories of basketball. I'm assuming that your dad is going to play a big part in those early memories of the game.
No doubt. My dad was a coach really the whole time I was growing up until high school. He did some other things, I think, just so he could spend some time watching me play during high school. But just being around the game, I grew up. I was at many practices. My dad coached at every level, high school, college, a couple years as an assistant in the NBA. So I was just around the game all the time. And even though I was a little kid, I wasn't very big. I just fell in love with the sport, and I wanted to be good at it, and found out at an early age I was pretty good at it. And then I just tried to work and continue to grow and become as good a player as I could all the way up through high school, and then hoping that I'd have an opportunity to play college basketball one day, which I was able to fulfill that dream and go to Georgia Tech for 4 years and play for Bobby Cremins there. And then, of course, the biggest dream was to play in the NBA, and there weren't a whole lot of people giving a 6-foot, guy from Enid, Oklahoma, much of a shot at being an NBA player. But I got the opportunity and was blessed to have had a 12-year career, and it was just a beyond my wildest dreams, honestly. If someone would have told me when I was younger, what were my biggest goals for basketball, I probably would have said, hey, if I could be good enough to get my college education paid for, that would have been great. I had no idea I would be able to go on and have an all-star NBA career.
When you were a kid, this is one of the things that I find fascinating about you, is when you were younger and you're growing up in Enid, how did you go out and find players on your level to be able to push yourself? Because obviously the AAU system that's in place now, you probably would have got yourself on a team and been flying around the country to play in all these different tournaments. But at the time when you were growing up, those things weren't really around. So what did you do in terms of trying to find competition to make yourself better?
Well, it's kind of funny because, in Enid, Oklahoma, there wasn't a lot. It was kind of hard to find real high-level competition, so to speak, outside of my family. I had my brothers to practice against, and they were really good players as well. But it's funny, after I had signed with Georgia Tech and after my freshman year, I came home in the summer, and I think Coach Cremins was a little concerned with me coming home for the summer of who who I was going to be playing against, and I took him down to the YMCA, and I was playing against all the 50 and 60-year-old dudes.
Nice. There you go, bro.
On their lunch hours. So a lot of those old guys in Enid, Oklahoma, helped prepare me, man, for my success.
That's hilarious. That is very funny. So I'm assuming then you went and you did compete a lot with your brothers growing up, and really your dad had a big influence on you as a shooter and just as a player. And so if you think back to those times, what was it that drove you to be as successful as you did and to work as hard as you did to get to the level that you ended up getting to?
Well, I think my competitive drive had a lot to do with it, and I think I came by that naturally through my dad. My dad was probably the most competitive person I was ever around. Matter of fact, he never let us win a game when we were little. I remember my mom, telling him, "Can't you just let them win every once in a while?" And my dad's answer would always be, "They're going to beat me soon enough. I'm not going to let them beat me now." And so, he had
to pad his career record. He had to pad that career record.
That's right, and it was funny when I was good enough to beat him, he wouldn't play me anymore.
Yeah, I hear you.
But I think it was just that competitive drive. I love to compete, and I love to take on challenges. I was small. I was 155 pounds coming out of high school. Had a lot of colleges pass on me. Basically, I didn't pass the eye test in a lot of ways, but I was grateful that Bobby Cremins had just gotten the job at Georgia Tech. They had just gotten into the ACC, and he took a chance on me, and he had to find somebody flying under the radar. And I fit that description to a T. So, I just looked at every opportunity to, hey, go prove people wrong, show people that they missed, and just tried to be as good as I could be at every level and compete at the highest level. When I went to college, they said we'd never be able to win in the ACC at Georgia Tech, and I came in as a freshman along with another guy named John Sally, who went on to play for the Detroit Pistons. And we helped build that program at Georgia Tech to an NCAA team and winning the ACC championship. So it was an unbelievable run and exciting time, and that's really where my name sort of got on the radar for the NBA, although once again I think a lot of NBA teams had trouble with the eye test. I just didn't quite look the part, but was fortunate enough to hook on with the Cavs and be a part of that building project as well, and come in with guys like Brad Daugherty and Ron Harper and Hot Rod Williams, and kind of get that thing rolling there, and just had an unbelievable career there with the Cavs and playing with some really, really great players.
What was it like? Well, let's jump back. I want to ask one question first about sort of the draft process before we go to what it was like to come in with those other three rookies that first year. But what was it? When did you know at Georgia Tech? When did you have an idea that, hey, I might have a chance to play at the next level? And then as you were going into the draft, what were you hearing from NBA people at that point in terms of where they thought you might go or what they thought your pro potential was?
Yeah, it was a little bit different. Back when I came out of college, you didn't have as much 24/7 coverage. ESPN, Twitter, all the social media. So, in a lot of ways, it was, unless you were talking directly to some teams, you kind of didn't really know exactly where you fit or where you might land. I think I felt like I knew I was going to be good enough to be an NBA player. I was competing every guard that I played against in the ACC, whether it be Johnny Dawkins or Muggsy Bogues, Nate McMillan. I mean, you just go down the line. They were all pro players, and yet I was first team all ACC. I was, picked better than them in college, and yet for some reason they were all supposed to be better than me at the next level. So, I never quite understood that thought process. But once again, I just think it had a lot to do with, size and the way I looked. I didn't fit the profile of an NBA player physically. But I think a lot of people look past, my heart, my ability to shoot the ball, the things that allowed me to be successful at that level.
Do you think being overlooked kind of for your entire career, like coming up through high school and then, even at Georgia Tech, and obviously when you were, being named first team all conference and those things. You were obviously getting some recognition, but there was certainly, I think at that time, as you described, there was sort of a disbelief that you could continue to excel at the same level at each one of the successive, levels that you got to. So in high school to college and then on to the NBA. Do you think that doubt had anything to do with driving you towards proving those people wrong?
No question. No question. I had a huge drive. I had a huge belief in my abilities, particularly on the offensive end of the floor. And so it just drove me to, like I said, that competitive nature. Hey, somebody tells me I can't do something, it just makes me work harder to try to be successful, because I just love the game of basketball, and to think that I wasn't going to be able to make it at the next level was just something that drove me and made me work as hard as I possibly could to be successful.
What do you remember from that first NBA training camp from the Cavs? What's your earliest memories of what that experience was like in terms of maybe how it was different from college, or just the guys that were there, the coaching staff? What do you remember from that first training camp?
Well, I think even though it was kind of a rebuilding situation, for the Cavs, when we came in, we brought in 6 rookies that year. It was they just brought in Lenny Wilkins, and Wayne Embry took over, a new ownership group, the whole thing. And so it was even though it was a new start, there still was some guys, some older guys like Mel Turpin and Keith Lee and guys like that. And I think just the overall talent level was something, in college you were the best player on your team, but then you get to the NBA and every guy on your team was the best player on their college team. So, it's just it's a big, huge step up in talent, in having to compete. But it was quite an interesting first year. Like I said, it was kind of a changeover from years where they had struggled there, and they were kind of, phasing some guys out and really starting over with that core group of young players.
What was the biggest adjustment you had to make to your game in order to get it to translate to the NBA level? Was there any one particular thing that you said, hey, I got to really get better at X in order for me to be able to succeed at this level?
Yeah, I think just even though I was small, I was more of a scoring guard in college. And at my size, I had to be a point guard at the NBA level. And even though I played point in college, it was kind of a hybrid. I'd bring the ball up the floor, but then, they'd run plays for me to score. So, just continue to develop my point guard skills and really develop into an all-around really good point guard at the NBA level was something that I had to work on. I felt fortunate that I got to start my career playing under a Hall of Fame guy, Lenny Wilkins, who had played my position. So, I really tried to really pick his brain and learn as much as I could from him. And he really helped me make that transition. And even though I came into the league at a time when there wasn't a lot of high-scoring point guards, I think that's what really set me apart and allowed me to be successful because, Lenny, he really saw my ability to shoot the ball and score it, and he didn't take that away from me and try to make me into kind of a Maurice Cheeks mold type guy, but he allowed me to use what I do best, my ability to shoot and stretch the defense and score to my advantage to help me become a better point guard in the other areas. And so, it was great for me to really be under his tutelage, particularly early on in my career.
So I know I'm kind of jumping ahead, but also staying back with like you starting your career. If you were playing in today's NBA and like all this high scoring thing, how do you feel your game would translate? Like you talked about stretching the defense. I think your game then would be phenomenal now. I think you would even excel even more. Do you feel that way or no?
I absolutely feel that way. My game was, probably a little bit ahead of its time. It just from the way the game is being played now. I mean, if I would have had the freedom of movement, not getting hit with forearms and being held all the time like I was in my era.
You didn't want Isaiah and Joe Dumars bumping you around every step you took on the court. Come on, Mark.
That's right. That's right. So, the way the game's set up today, I certainly think I would have, would really fit with the way I played, and obviously probably would have been able to play a few more years too without the wear and tear.
Yeah.
How many more threes would you have taken a game?
Well, I laughed. I was telling somebody, they asked me the other day, and there was a couple of years I led the league in 3-point attempts per game, shooting 5 a game. You know, I was the guy shooting the most at shooting 5 a game. So, I mean, I'm saying guys today are doing that in the first quarter.
I was gonna say that's like per quarter for some of these guys, you know.
Yeah, no question. So, you know, obviously the scoring numbers and everything are off the charts right now, but you know, the way the game's being played, I mean, you probably could add at least 10 more points a game to your average.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I think it's interesting to project, you know, guys from different eras into this era where it's more freewheeling and you're shooting threes, and it's got to be a little strange. I'm a little bit younger than you, but I'm 48, and so you know, I look at basketball in some ways today, the way it's being played, and, you know, guys have a 2-on-1 break and the one guy runs out to the corner to shoot a 3. It just, the whole idea of that just seems insane to me. I was telling somebody the other day that, you know, I can't remember honestly that ever driving into the basket, being underneath the basket, and then throwing the ball all the way back out to the 3-point line. And now that's a play that, you know, obviously everybody has in their arsenal. And I played Division I college basketball and I don't think ever threw that pass. Maybe I kicked one out to the corner, but I certainly never drove under the basket and threw it way out to the top of the key. And now the game is just so different.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, you know, the old school, you know, fast breaks, 3-on-2, 2-on-1. Your goal was to get layups. You know, now your goal is to get threes. So it's just it's a totally different game.
So if you go back to the beginning of your Cavs career, and you know you're with Hot Rod, and you're with Harper, and you're with Brad Doherty, and you guys are sitting around and, you know, in the locker room, and you're at practice, and when do you start to realize that group, that all those guys are going to be really good players, and that you guys have a chance to put together something special? When does that realization hit you?
Well, I think it hit us pretty early on. Even though I didn't start my first year, Brad did. Ron did, Hot Rod did, and I got, you know, a lot of minutes, you know, my first year as well, even though I was coming in off the bench. But, you know, I just think that experience was, you know, you can't put a price tag on that. You know, it was basically they threw us out there and we had to grow up together. And I think just all being together and being through it and being a bunch of good guys that, you know, team guys that cared about winning. I think we saw early on, hey, if we just continue to develop and learn and get better, that we got a chance to be pretty good one of these days.
How important, I'm going to ask you this probably later too from a coaching perspective, but I'll ask it to you now as a player. How important is that character piece of, you know, you mentioned they're all good guys. How important is that in an NBA locker room? How important is it that guys are able to get along and like each other, in terms of how that translates to a winning team?
Well, I think it's huge. I think it's very underrated. You know, you hear the word chemistry, team chemistry all the time, and you know, the NBA is a job and everybody understands that, and you don't have to like everybody to be able to go out and play well, but I think it certainly, you know, helps if you have a healthy respect for each other and your teammates, and you're going for the same goal. And I just felt like, you know, we had a lot of guys that just, you know, we fit together, and, you know, we were all family guys. We spent time with each other, our wives and our kids as we started having them. And it was just it was a great environment to be around. I love those teams. You know, we added Larry Nance and Craig Elo, you know, the following couple years. And we just had that core group of guys that, you know, it makes it a lot easier when you enjoy who you work with and showing up every day. And we enjoyed each other. We enjoyed playing together and going into battle together.
And so if you look back on those years, obviously you ran into Michael and you ran into the Pistons. And, you know, I think that there's a lot of, you know, I know here in Cleveland, and just speaking for myself and Jason, you know, there's a lot of fond memories for those teams, for you guys, and just what you were able to accomplish. And, you know, if you look back at those times, Is there something that you can point to, a specific game, a series, something that you're like, man, if that just would have gone slightly differently, maybe we would have been able to get through the Bulls, or we would have been able to get through the Pistons and get to the finals, and then who knows? Is there any one thing that jumps out at you, one game, one series that really, you look back at and you're like, oh, if we could have just got that, it would.
You know what he's gonna say, right? It's got to be the shot, right, Mark?
Well, I think that was, everybody thinks through the shot, and what a great, what I tell people all the time, even though most people don't realize that was like a first round series, that there was only 5 games. It was different back then. Most people, when they see that shot, they think that was for the Eastern Conference Championship or whatever. That was really one of our first kind of playoff series, that we had gotten into. And the other thing was we were really, really banged up. We had beaten Chicago 6 times that year in the regular season. We just felt like we were a better team than they were. And I was hurt. I'd pulled a hamstring. I didn't even play the first game of that series, and Chicago comes in and steals that game 1. And so we were pretty banged up, and yet somehow we were able to win game 4 in Chicago to bring it back to Cleveland, and then just obviously that unbelievable game. And we were actually down. Most people don't realize either that we were down with 6 seconds to go by 1 point. Elo throws the ball inbounds.
Got the ball back and made the layup. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the place is just going nuts. And then 3 seconds later, Jordan hits a shot. So, I mean, just the magnitude of the highs and lows just within, a 10-minute span there was just incredible. And that's when, after that series, too, that the Cavs ended up making a decision to trade Ron Harper. And so I think it just had implications for our team. I think if Ron's with us, stays with us, that I think we continue to grow, and we're right in the mix. There was a lot of talk at that time that Chicago was about to break that team up because they weren't really achieving what they thought they would up to that point. So that shot was, even though it was an incredible shot and we lost the series, I think it really impacted kind of the trajectory of both franchises in a manner.
So how close were you with Ron at that time? And when you look back at the trade, and obviously, Danny came to Cleveland and was a great guy and ended up working for the team, and it certainly probably didn't live up to the hype that he may have had as the number 2 pick and his college career and that kind of thing. But how close were you to Ron when he got traded, and what was the feeling like in the locker room at that point?
Yeah, I was pretty devastated with it when I heard, because Ron and I we just loved playing together. Ron was my guy, and I really felt like, we had one of the top backcourts in the NBA. I get with, Chicago or Portland had Drexler and those guys, but beyond that, I didn't really see there was anybody better than Ron, me, and then having Craig Elo come off the bench. So, I just felt like we had something really good going there, and the way Ron and I complimented each other on the court. So that was a big loss for us from a playing standpoint. Like you said, Danny Ferry came in and it didn't work out as well as what they had hoped. I mean, we already had Brad, Larry, and Hot Rod there, and so Danny came in, and really there wasn't a place for him, I think, to get the kind of minutes that they thought that he would probably get when he came in. So it was kind of a tough deal the way it worked out on the basketball court. Danny was a great guy. We all liked him and the whole bit, but I just think from a playing standpoint, I think we, lost a player that was a different kind of player. He was that slasher guy, Ron, and could do things to make the game easier for everybody. So it was a big loss for us on the basketball court.
Yeah, and he obviously proved that later when he was with the Bulls and they were able to win championships with him as a starter, that he was a championship player. And I know that was one of the things when I was a kid, I got a chance to work at Ron's camps here in Cleveland a couple times and got to meet him, and just I always thought he was a good guy, and was sad at the time to see him go. And again, that shot I'll never forget. I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan, but I will never forget where I was at the moment when that shot went in, and again, I'm sure being on the floor for that was was not a pleasant experience, and it certainly wasn't a pleasant experience from a fan standpoint.
Sadly, I'm not old enough to remember that happening. Sadly,
so you and I'll just have to commiserate alone, Mark, and we'll leave Jason out of that one. So, two related questions, not directly related to that, but one, can you talk for a second just about what it was like to play against Jordan, and then number two, who was a guy that you played against in the league that maybe wasn't one of the biggest names in the league at the time, but a guy that you felt like gave you trouble, or that it was somebody that was always a challenge for you to play against, that maybe was kind of under the radar, that the average person might not realize was such a tough competitor?
Yeah, there was so many guys. Obviously, to your first point, Jordan, Michael was such a great player. I mean, there's just no way to question that in any form or fashion. I think the thing that was impressive to me as an opponent of his, and I had known Mike since college. We played against each other, and we played together on the Pan American team and in college, and so just I don't think everybody knew Michael was going to be a really good pro, but I don't think anybody had any idea he would turn into MJ or what he became, and I think just his ability to continue to get better and better as his career went along was amazing. And when you played him in the playoffs, it wasn't like we weren't playing good basketball. I mean, we were a really, really good team and playing at a high level, and it just seemed like he had the ability to just take it to whatever level he needed to get the job done. So he was an amazing player. People say, those series are things, they were unbelievable. We, like I said, we were really good. They were really good. We really battled it out. We just unfortunately came short against those guys. But the era that I played in, as far as other players, there were so many guys that I think were under the radar, that they were just unbelievably good players. One guy that comes to mind was a guy named Derek Harper that played at Dallas. I mean, he was a big, strong guard, 6'4", 6'5", very physical, which they allowed that to play to guys' advantage when I played. A guy they would hold and push and shove. Another guy that they would give you problems on the defensive end was a guy named Paul Pressey, who played for Milwaukee. Another guy that was just long and, athletic and could do a lot of things on the basketball court. But, there was guys like that, all over the league when I got in. And, of course, you had guys that people know, Maurice Cheeks, Mo Cheeks when I got in the league. Isaiah Thomas, obviously, was unbelievable. Played against him in battles against Detroit. And so, the East, was the beast back then. There's no question about it. It's kind of like playing in the West these days. But, every night in the East, it was going to be a physical, hard-fought battle. And you're playing against just great players all the time.
Thinking back to the coaches that you've had an opportunity to be impacted by, and I know you obviously talked about how important Lenny Wilkens was to your development as a young player in the NBA. Was there an assistant coach or somebody that, and obviously at the time you were playing, there wasn't nearly the number of coaches and staff that there is today, but was there an assistant coach or somebody that you really connected with over the course of your career that you feel like had a positive impact on what you were able to do?
Yeah. Lenny's longtime assistant, Dick Helm, was just an unbelievable guy. He was just one of those guys that was always positive. He was always trying to find ways to help you improve. I remember after my first year with the Cavs, I'd been John Bagley's backup, and then they drafted Kevin Johnson, with a lottery pick. And, back then you just didn't keep 3 point guards. And so I'm kind of looking at the situation thinking, maybe not looking so good for me. And I remember Dick Helm, I saw him in the summer and I was working out, and I remember him coming up, and maybe he knew something I didn't at the time, but he just said, look, I think this is going to be a great opportunity for you. Get yourself in the best shape of your life. And because I'd had my appendix taken out during my rookie year, and so I missed a month and was a little bit up and down my rookie year. But he was just always encouraging that way, and I did those things. And then that second year, they traded John Bagley. Kevin Johnson was a couple weeks late negotiating his contract, so I'm in camp the only point guard for 2 weeks. And by the time Kevin showed up, I was rolling by then. And so I ended up winning the starting job, and they ended up trading Kevin later on in the year. So, and that's how we got Larry Nance. So, I think, a guy like Dick he was always positive. He kept you, allowed you to always continue to grow, find ways to help you be a better player.
And so you mentioned, you went out in the summertime and you were working out and that kind of thing. What did your summer routine look like, while you were in the NBA? When you went back, when you went back home when it was the off season and you were ready to, start getting yourself prepared for the next season, what did you try to do in terms of that preparation?
Yeah, the summers were my favorite time of the year. I really loved the opportunity to try to come back the next year with something new, whether I saw a move I liked another player made or just something that I wanted to add to my game. That was something I took pride in, to come back the next year with something else in my arsenal to add to my game. And so I spent a lot of time just by myself in the gym or working out with the guys. I didn't do a lot of just pick up ball and things like that. I had purposeful workouts in the summers to really try to add something to allow me to be better the next year that I showed up.
So you said you had purposeful workouts and you tried working on things like when you look at the way that these guys can like look at all these different things like between YouTube and just highlights and things like that. Do you even imagine what your workouts would look like now? If you could transport yourself into this time or move all the advantages these guys have nowadays to like watch film to the extent that they can watch film over and over and over again on their iPads or at home. Do you ever think about how your work sessions would be completely different now than they were back when you did that all on your own?
Yeah, there's no question that there's a lot more access to information, to video, like you said, instant access that we didn't have back when I played. But honestly, the way I look at it is, in some ways, I think it can be a little bit information overload at times, maybe even distraction sometimes with all the things going on. For me, it was just getting in a gym, just kind of going back to your roots, just getting in a high school gym back home or something and just working on your game and without any distractions and things like that. And it really helped me focus and get better. And I think sometimes, there's so many good things out there and available, but sometimes I think there's almost too much information that can cause some confusion or at times even allow guys to get distracted rather than just really getting focused on what they need to work on.
So on a typical summer day while you were in the offseason of the NBA, what did that typical, if there was a typical day, how long did you spend in the gym working on your game? How much time did you spend on physical conditioning, whether that was, running or weight training or whatever else you might have done at the time? How much time did you spend on a daily basis during the off season?
Well, I think it varied during different parts. Obviously right after a season, you don't want to jump right in and just start killing yourself. You got to let your body recover. But then you kind of start lifting weights, getting back, working, just getting in the gym. And then as the summer wears on, you really start picking it up. But, from weight training to conditioning to individual workouts to toward the end of the summer, getting in, start actually getting into some, pick up stuff to where you're actually getting up and down the floor to start getting your conditioning. It was easily, 4 or 5 hours a day in the gym. And just as you got older, that you monitored that just to try to keep yourself fresh as the season went on, the more wear and tear you got on your body and things like that. But, I just would stay in the gym until I felt good about it. People said, particularly with free throws, how many shots did you shoot a day? It wasn't a particular number. Some days it might be 300, 400, really trying to get stuff down. Another day you might go in and shoot 100 and you're just feeling really good about it. And you say, hey, that's all I need to do today. and you move on to the next thing. So I was just a big, it was big for me to feel like whatever purpose I was going to the gym for, that I accomplished that. If I did that, if it took me an hour to get that done, 2 hours, whatever it took. But it wasn't like I'm going to go and I'm going to be there for 3 hours for sure, this or that. It was kind of a situation where I monitored. I knew what I wanted to accomplish, and however long that took to get that done.
How would you compare like the focus on nutrition and conditioning that teams and players have today with what that was like in your era?
Well, I think from that standpoint, the access to information and the knowledge now that people have from a nutritional standpoint and training standpoint is so much farther ahead than when I played. We didn't have a lot of that information. I mean, when I got in the league, we were using, in a lot of ways, those old universal kind of machines.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
And lifting things to the free weight stuff. And now, there's so much more emphasis on flexibility and band work and other things that allow guys to see the importance of those things that allow them to have longer and healthier careers.
So as your career is starting to wind down, is there a point where, did you always know you wanted to get into coaching, or was that something that sort of creeped up on you, or how did you approach the idea of, hey, at some point I might want to follow my dad's footsteps and be a coach?
Well, to be honest, I really didn't think much about going into coaching because I grew up with a coach. I knew what it took. I knew the time constraints. I knew to really be all in, all the energy and effort and the frustrations and, that my dad and I watched. So, that wasn't on the top of my mind. I first thought about, what am I going to do after I quit playing? I had 3 small kids at the time and wanted to spend a lot of time with them. And yet people would call me, I ended up putting a shooting lab together in Atlanta, Georgia. And pro teams started sending me players to work with in the summer to help their shooting. And then one thing kind of just led to another. And then teams wanted me to come work with them, during the season. And then other teams wanted me to, come on full time. And it just kind of one thing after another. So in a lot of ways, it kind of, the game kind of seeked me out a little bit rather than the other way around. So it just kind of pulled me in, my love for the game, wanting to teach and pass on things that allowed me to be successful to young players, and it kind of led to getting pulled into the coaching thing.
So, as a shooting coach, if we have some players out there in our audience or coaches, what are 1 or 2 key things that Mark Price recommends for, let's say, a kid who's in middle school or high school? What are 1 or 2 things you say if you're going to focus on anything with your shot? Because you talk to different coaches and they all have different philosophies about what's the most important part. In your mind, what's the most important part of a young player's shot?
Well, I think obviously good form and technique. The earlier you can get that lined up, the better chance you're going to have. And, you can get into details of that, but, that your elbows straight, you heard the old saying, beef, balance, your elbow, eyes on the target, follow through. You get the basics kind of down as early as possible, and then you really begin to start working on, your feet and your balance. I think that's the most overrated piece that people don't understand. And when you talk about shooting, most people think of what it looks like from the waist up, the elbow and the follow through, what all's going on there. But, most of missed shots are due from lack of preparation, from footwork and balance and other things that are involved. So there's a lot that's involved with shooting. But, I think particularly at a young age, the more you can get your technique consistent, where your elbow's under the ball and you're shooting the ball consistently straight at the rim, and then you begin to work on the other things as your body matures, I think, you have a chance to be successful.
Yeah, I think the feet are really a key thing that most coaches, most people, most players tend to overlook and they forget about, like you said, they're looking at the shot up top as opposed to looking at the balance and the base. And I think that's one of the things that we've heard from a lot of the high school coaches and skill development coaches that we've had an opportunity to talk to is just, the focus on making sure that you have good balance and good feet, and that's going to get a kid off to a good start as far as putting together a shot that they can, eventually make a lot of as they go and get older. So, let's talk a little bit now. Let's jump into what you've been doing, coaching wise, and you've been with 4 or 5 different NBA organizations. Can you talk a little bit about what your roles have been at each one of the spots? Have you mostly been focused on skill development? If you had any different roles with the organizations that you've been with?
Yeah, I've really, as an assistant coach at the NBA level, I've really been involved in basically every part of the game. Initially, when I first, started as kind of a shooting coach, then kind of into overall skill development of players to moving on to the bench. When I was with Orlando Magic, doing scouts and scouting other teams and just basically doing the whole plethora of NBA, assistant coaching. And so, I've really covered the gamut, so to speak, of coaching at what it takes to be successful at the NBA level.
So going off of that, so you've covered the gamut as an assistant coach. Do you have aspirations to ever be a head coach, or do you at the NBA level, or is that not something you want to do?
Well, I think you always want to, as in whatever you do and in whatever profession that you're in, you want to try to reach as high level as you can. So obviously, if that opportunity presents itself, that would be something that I would look forward to. At the same time, I've always been a person that whatever I'm doing, I'm locked in, and whatever role that I'm in at the time, I'm focused on that. I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about what ifs or what might happen down the road, but certainly I think anybody that's ever coached, and coached at the NBA level would love an opportunity to be a head coach one day. But like I said, I'm a big believer in God, and God's always provided opportunities for me, and I try to take advantage of and do the very best that I can in whatever role, and if whatever that leads to, I'm good with. And so I'm happy, I'm content in where I'm at, but at the same time, any opportunities that come along, you always look at them and see if they're something that would be a good fit for you.
What's the most satisfying part of being a coach as you look at what you do on a day-to-day basis? Is it seeing an individual player improve? Is it, scouting and getting something that, helps the team, overall to their success, relationships with players? What is it about the coaching that you enjoy the most? If you can, I don't even know if you can pin it down or narrow it down at all, but what do you enjoy the most about the process of coaching in the NBA?
Yeah, I think there's so many things that you get excited about as a coach, whether it be, like you said, player development or scouting and helping a team be successful. But I've always really been into skill development and trying to help guys get better. When you see a guy that's never made a 3-point shot make a 3-point shot in a game, or a guy that improves his free throw percentage, or a guy learns how to split a double team, or just grows and becomes a better player. That's something that I think, just as a coach, for me anyway, is really exciting to know that you help a young player get better and grow, and hopefully they'll continue to pass those things along as well.
So speaking of young players, you had the opportunity to be with Golden State during Steph's rookie year. What was your initial impression of him as a rookie? Did you know him before that? Obviously, Dell was here in Cleveland, and just what was your impression of getting a chance to work with Steph there as a rookie? Because even then, at that point, obviously, nobody knew that he was going to become what he's become, at least not on the outside. So what was it like to work with him that first year?
Well, Steph's always been great. I've known Steph, like you said. I played with Dell in Cleveland, and he used to bring Steph to the gym sometimes, and when he was just a little kid. And so I've known Steph and Dell and their family for years. And so when I got to Golden State and just got up there, it was a little unfortunate for him just because he was having so many injuries right at the beginning of his career with his ankles and his feet and things like that. And I remember back then a lot of people wondered, if he'd even ever get his NBA career going because he was having problems staying healthy. And so, I was kind of there during that period, so I didn't really get to see Steph when he was, starting to get healthy and get rolling. But obviously just spending time with him as a young player and trying to pass on something. Of course, he knew me from playing with his dad, and so we had that relationship as well. But I don't think anybody could have predicted he would have turned into what he's become. It's been unbelievable to watch his development.
So here's a question. Obviously, you are one of the best shooters in the history of the NBA. But when you watch him and the shots that he can take and make, I watch him and I just think that there's nobody that's ever played the game that's taken the volume of shots, the shots off the dribble, the shots from weird angles, the quick releases that he has. How do you look at what he does and say, wow, how does that guy do it? Or do you say, wow, I can see where, in the right situation, there's other guys that could do that same thing, or is he just a complete anomaly?
Well, I don't think there's anybody that's ever played that's doing the kind of things Steph's doing right now. What he's done the last couple years, it's been really amazing. But I think there's obviously a chance of some guys coming along. I mean, it's you never say never. I mean, there's always players coming along, particularly if the rules continue to stay like they are and the freedom that it's given players out there on the court to play offensively. So, Steph's, he hit the jackpot because he came along at just the right time. The way the game changed and the rules have changed, it's really allowed him to showcase his abilities, and he's so much fun to watch. It's hard not to watch Steph, even if you're rooting for the other team and not just be mesmerized by some of the things.
I was just about to say, except when he's playing your team, right?
But I think even playing, he's just a guy. He's one of those guys. I remember playing guys and you're playing them and you're wanting to beat them, but then certain guys just do some things and you're just like, all right, that was amazing. I don't care the guys on the other team, but and I think he's one of those guys that people, they really enjoy watching him play because he does so many amazing things out there.
Do you look at the athleticism? Not only of the guys when you were playing, but the athleticism of players today, and obviously with your particular physical set of tools, you didn't have the same physical tools that a lot of guys had in terms of, size and leaping ability and that kind of thing. Do you ever watch guys that are just flying to the rim and dunking all over the place and wonder, what would have been like if I would have had the ability to add that to all the, the great skills that I had, or did you not look at it that way?
Well, I do look at it, you watch Russell Westbrook, take off and go to the basket, and you think, boy, that'd be fun to do that once. It'd be fun to do that once. Wouldn't it? It
really would. I'm with you, Mark, 100%.
Yeah, it would have been. I don't know. You'd have to look down in history. I don't know how many guys are four-time All-Star never dunked the ball in the NBA, but
there's not many. I can guarantee you that. You and Bob Cousy, maybe.
That was certainly not in my arsenal, but I always kind of looked at it like I might not have been the player that I was if I'd have had, I think a lot of guys that are athletic and they don't develop the skill set because they just dominate athletically all the way through high school and maybe even college, and then they get to the NBA level and all of a sudden, okay, well, the guy playing me is just as athletic as I am, and now I can't make an 18-foot shot. So, it's I think by me developing my skill set was what allowed me to be successful. So I never really got too caught up in not being able to be a high flyer or anything.
Yeah, you gotta live within your own reality, right?
That's right. That's right.
So, in your current role with Denver, what are some of the challenges right now that you find as an NBA coach? What are some of the things that you as a coaching staff are constantly working through to try to help your team improve and try to help your individual players on the team improve?
Well, I think one of the big challenges today is it's, obviously been the last, particularly the last 10, 15 years with kind of the one and done players that are coming into the league. They're so young. It's hard for me to even fathom, being 19 years old and coming into the NBA. I mean, it was a different league back then, obviously, but, I felt like I was a pretty mature 22-year-old when I showed up, and yet there was so much to learn, and it's such a higher level game that I think the biggest challenge as coaches right now in the NBA is you got so many young players that, you hate to use the term, don't necessarily know how to play the game, but there's a lot of truth to it. So much of their success up to this point, they're 19 years old, is they've just dominated with their physical talents and helping to teach them the game. You're really starting at a different place than when guys came in, like a Tim Duncan that played 4 years in college and came in and just kind of understood and knew how to play when he showed up. Kind of guys, it's you see fewer and fewer guys like that now coming into the league.
So obviously the NBA does like their Rookie Symposium and things to try to get guys acclimated to what they're going to be facing, off the basketball floor. What do you guys do in terms of providing those young guys the support that they might need in terms of making decisions off the floor? Like, do you spend time talking about that as an organization, as a coaching staff with the players? How does that process happen?
Yeah, I mean, you do talk about those things, and I think that the league as a whole has done a good job, like you said, of the Rookie Symposium and things that they've added now to try to give these players more access to people and information for things that can help them in their everyday lives. And I also know that most every team now has a position that's filled sometimes by former players and other things that are just they're there basically to befriend the guys, to kind of help them with everyday tasks, anything that they might need, to kind of make sure their life off the court stays on track as well. So, I mean, the NBA's done a really good job of continuing to try to educate guys and to provide as much as support for them as they can. Ultimately guys, leave and they have to be grown men and they're professionals, and hopefully they're surrounding themselves with the right kind of people that will help them, not hurt them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that it seems like that, there was an era where guys maybe were making, weren't getting that same support, and you had some guys that made bad decisions and, didn't use their money wisely and ended up in, in some bad situations. And now it seems like even though the guys are younger, it seems like because of the prevalence of social media and just the fact that these guys are kind of out there in front of the public for a long time. I mean, you look at like Zion Williamson at Duke, he's been a national celebrity now for, a couple years, and, eventually he's going to get to the NBA and he's going to have had, a lot of demands already put on him. And it seems like guys are much better, at least outwardly from the outside, at handling some of those off the court media type things. Do you think that's the case, or is that just something from the outside that I have a misperception of?
No, I think it definitely is better. I think there's guys that like you said are used to the kind of spotlight being on them at an earlier age, and have learned to have to deal with that and rely on family and friends and people close to them. So I definitely think it's better. I think you still have you're always going to have bad stories or sad stories from time to time. It's just inevitable, unfortunately. when guys, maybe get in. And, I think the biggest challenge for guys, it's always been, is it's a relatively short career. And even though guys are making a ton of money now, it's your opportunity for making that's a short window, and you want to make sure that you're doing the things to help, prepare you for the future, because it just takes one injury. And I don't know what the average is now. I know when I was playing, I think the average NBA career was about 3 years, 3 years or 4. I mean, you have the guys that play for 10, 15 years, but you also have guys that are
Vince Carter
for 1-2 years, so it's, it's really important that hopefully they're saving their money and they're making good decisions so that, they'll be able to take care of themselves and their family for the rest of their life.
Yeah. Not everyone's going to be Vince Carter, right?
No, that's
is it? When you watch him play, are you amazed at the fact that he's 41 years old and he's out there competing and he's playing a lot of minutes for his age? Is that amazing to you?
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's just he's kind of defying the odds. There's no doubt about that. He's just, his ability to stay healthy physically and to last that long is, what most guys would dream of. It's just pretty incredible.
We need him in the slam dunk contest. If you see him, you need to let him know that he should be in the slam dunk contest this year.
He should definitely get an honorary, at least an honorary dunk in the dunk contest.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be a lot of fun to put him in there. So, last question here, Mark. If when you think back to all the guys that you played with, how close are you to some of your teammates, whether it's from high school, college, NBA times? Are there guys that you're still in touch with on a regular basis that you consider to be good close friends that you still talk to today?
Yeah, it's I think everybody gets spread out. It's probably not on an everyday basis, but I've stayed extremely close with guys all through my career. I'm close with guys from high school to college, and those Cavs teams, guys like Brad and Larry and Craig Elo and Hot Rod before he passed, and I'm still close with Ron Harper as well, and so you develop. I just when you're with guys, and even though you may not talk to them every day or maybe not even every week, but there's just that bond that you have from playing together and being brothers on the court and going to war together every night. That's just it's a unique thing that it's hard to put into words, but it's like once you've done that and done it together, there's like when you see them or you hear from them or you talk to them, it's like just like it was when you played together. You don't miss a beat. So I feel blessed to have played with a lot of good guys and have been able to stay in touch with a lot of those guys as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think basketball, and sports in general have that ability to bring people together in a way that there's such an intensity to the experience that I think, there's no way that you can go through the things that an athlete goes through, especially when you play at a high level like you did, and not have those bonds be so strong. Mark, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to share with the audience? If so, you can go ahead and share it. And if there's a way for people to, if you want to share maybe your Twitter handle for people to reach out to you, if they're interested in just saying hello or wishing you good luck. Hopefully we're going to get a lot of people here in Cleveland listening to the podcast and all throughout, your fans, wherever they may be. But if there's anything that we didn't talk about that you want to share, and if not, just go ahead and share your Twitter handle with us.
Twitter handle is Mark25Price. And, just as far as, I know you guys are in Cleveland, and in my year spent there, I think the Cleveland fans have always been just unreal, and the connection that I had with the fans when I played there I still feel that today, shoot, I probably half the people that follow me on Twitter are from Cleveland, so it's it's fun to interact with them, and every time I go back, I get to see so many people and friends, and they've always been so supportive, and I just really appreciate that. And I loved my years playing, for the Cavs, and Cleveland obviously will always hold a special place in my heart. So, I appreciate it, guys. I appreciate you having me on. Good luck with everything, and maybe we'll run into each other down the road.
Absolutely, Mark. We can't thank you enough. We really appreciate you jumping on with us tonight. It's been a lot of fun for Jason and I to talk hoops with you. And to everyone out there, we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks. If you're looking for a great way to spend the holidays playing some basketball, please join us at one of our Head Start basketball holiday camps on December 27th and 28th, 2018. We'll have a camp at Hoop Guru Courthouse in Hinckley and also at St. Paschal Baylon School in Highland Heights. The Head Start basketball holiday camps will emphasize the fundamentals of basketball with individual attention given to each camper. You'll improve your basketball skills and have a ton of fun at the Head Start basketball holiday camp. To register or get more information, please visit our website, www.headstartbasketball.com. Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, brought to you by Head Start Basketball.